Good afternoon. My name is Kremlinski. I'm presenting on behalf of the Vermont VOAD Training Committee on flood resilient home strategies. This is an educational guide for homeowners and those working in flood recovery, assisting homeowners rebuilding after the flooding that occurred in 2023, 2024, 2025, and future floods as well. We're going to go over a little bit of flood mitigation strategies. The problem we see is homes in flood-prone areas face water intrusion. This flooding can damage foundations, the insulation, flooring, walls, driveways, roofs, yards in somebody's home, and can impact their ability to enter and exit their house safely, and it can cause their home to become unsafe, both from mold and mildew growth that can follow the water damage. Our opportunity here is that early preparation can minimize damage. Mitigation practices can improve the home value over time and cause it to be more resilient. And homeowners can implement cost-effective solutions before a disaster strikes. The solution here is we're going to talk about three separate sections here. We're going to talk about exterior, things like French drains, retaining walls, and grading to redirect water. Interior, we're going to go over some basement waterproofing, some mold-resistant insulation, and wall and flooring materials that are more flood resilient. And some ongoing strategies like proper drainage, proper ventilation, dehumidification to prevent mold from coming into the home. Yeah, and the three sections we're going to go over are outdoor, basement, and living areas. So the outdoor, we're going to touch on French drains, talk a little bit about gutters and the benefit of having gutters, and some green stormwater infrastructure like swales in your yard. For the basement, we're going to go over the use of a sump pump, the benefit of having a sump pump, and the specific strategies for having sump pumps. We're going to talk about different ways to insulate your basement if that's something that you would like to do. It's given Vermont basements are all a little different. Some people prefer to have insulation in their basement, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And interior perimeter drains, which helps water flood into sump pumps so that we can pull water out quicker. And with this, we'll discuss a little bit about dehumidification in a basement to keep mold and mildew from growing. And we understand not every house has a basement, so we'll talk a little bit about that too. But our last section will be living areas. So in some cases, this is the first floor. In some cases, this is the only floor, but I'm separating out living areas as the places that people live, spend their time, and exist within. A lot of these flooded as well for people. So we're going to talk about different insulations that could be utilized in this case, different wall materials. Drywall is not the only material that you can use for your wall, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and some different flooring materials that could be used as well. So to jump right in, we're going to start with resistance versus resilience. And I took some of this from Mike Dacey's presentation with crew. I thought it was really important to talk about the difference between the two. So the primary aim of resistance is to keep water out completely, which we know is not always possible and not always beneficial for the home. Resilience would be minimizing the damage and speeding up recovery if water gets in. Our strategy here for resistance is to prevent or exclude passively or actively all water from entering the home or the area. But when we talk about resilience, we're just damage limitation and rapid recovery. So material choices and the design on how we build back. Some key measures for resistance would be flood barriers, which we'll talk a little bit about, non-return valves, which we'll cover, and ways to seal up your home. When you're focusing on resilience, water-resistant materials, raised electronics and utilities, things that we'll touch on to help in the event of a flood, that you're not continually replacing your electrical and utility and hot water pumps and things like that. The outcome of a flood-resistant home would be a dry building during a flood. We know as well that this is not always possible, but a resilient home, the outcome is less damage, faster, cleaner, and drying, quicker reoccupation after a flood, and just a safer home overall, and given that a house may continue to flood over and over again. And this is really knowing that there are some people that live in a home in a location that is going to continue to flood. Leaving is not an option, and they're looking for ways to keep their house as safe as possible over the long term, and knowing that they can't keep relying on continually doing the same thing over and over again. So we're going to talk a little bit about ways that we can be a little bit more resilient and utilize some tactics to help us get there. Going to talk a little bit about French drains. So a French drain is a drainage system that goes around a house. They're essentially a trench filled with gravel, often with perforated pipe in the middle, gravel around it, and wrapped in fabric like a burrito, as Mike says. I like that too because the fabric will help keep a lot of the microparticles and mud and soot out of the drainage pipe so that they don't get clogged. This redirects water away from the home foundation, which is beneficial for when water is inundating in and around the foundation, leaking in and causing the basement to flood that way. Therefore, it reduces basement flooding and mold risk. But it is important to know that proper slope and discharge are essential for this. What's really great about French drains is they're fairly simple. For a few $1,000s. In some cases, you could get a French drain put around maybe just one side of your house or two sides of your house to help keep water as it's coming up out of your house. Another benefit of it is when water is coming down off of your roof, instead of having the water come back down inside your house, it can slope outward into the French drain and away from the house. Again, they're fairly affordable for the amount of money that it would cost to put a French drain in or fix a French drain in your house, around your house. The benefits could be enormous. One of the biggest things I see is that people have French drains, but they failed in many cases a long time before the homeowner bought that house. And people don't really know. So it's important to you could bring a professional in to take a look and see how your French drain looks, see if it's working the way that you would hope for it to work, and get it repaired. And in a lot of cases, you could do it yourself if you were willing to pick up a shovel and get it done, or rent a mini excavator on your own and take care of it. But getting a professional in to do it, as I said, we've gotten quotes from just a few $1,000s for fixing the main area that needs to be needs the drainage, like uphill from the house, all the way to surrounding the entire house, which is ideal. But again, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about is so house dependent, and I'll get into some of the nuances in each section, but we're really just going to talk about everything, and we're going to talk about a lot of different strategies, but every house is different, and getting a contractor in or a professional in to go over how your house is set up and your needs given the type of flooding that you have is going to be key. Gutters, I understand why a lot of people might not have gutters given the winters that we have here, the snow load on the roof, them falling off, ripping off due to snow and ice. But if your house is continually seeing water come back inside around the foundation because of water coming off the roof, gutters might not be a bad choice. And there are different gutters. They make some with caps on the top to keep leaves and things out. And what I think is beneficial about gutters is you can control the water coming off your house and where it goes. Like having a good downspout to get as far away from the house as possible is important. And also building up a backfill of gravel around your foundation so that water naturally just flows away from your house. Gutters take the water that would drop around your foundation and move it away. Proper downspouts and piping can keep foundations from inundation. Therefore, there's less pressure on your foundation that could cause cracking, especially with winters with our freeze thaws that we have. If water does get down in between your foundation and the gravel or whatever backfill you have around your foundation and it freezes and expands, it can cause your foundation to crack. So it's something I see a lot. And it's really important to think about like how you can mitigate that from happening. And a lot of the best techniques that you can do to keep your house flood resilient is outside the house. And I know that that's not the case. If the flood water is raised 7 feet up into your house and pass through that way. But a lot of people were getting just from groundwater and the amount of rain that came down in a short amount of time, came down off the back of a hill. Stuff like this is incredibly beneficial. And making sure that your downspout is as far enough away from the house as possible. Piping into a rain barrel or a dry well is best. And this is also to control the amount of water being thrown out into your yard as well, and allows you to use that water in the future. And a drip line infiltration trench is best when gutters are not possible. So if you don't have gutters, you're not going to do gutters, going around your house and doing a drip line infiltration trench is important. So really you would build up gravel up against your foundation, sloping away from your house. And where the drip line of the roof is, you could do a little trench funneling water away from the house. And you could do that with ground fabric as well, and different techniques for that. It's worth looking into. Again, just keeping the water as it comes off your house, settling away from the foundation. So we're going to move on to green stormwater infrastructure. I could probably talk for an hour about green stormwater infrastructure. There are people who know a lot more about it than I do that could talk for days about it. There's a wide variety of green stormwater infrastructure. There's a lot of really wonderful manuals on the internet. I know the state of Vermont has put out one. Friends at the Winooski River talk a lot about it, and they have it on their website as well. In some cases, it's as simple as a rain barrel, collecting water, keeping it away from the house so it's not flooding too much, and then could go all the way up into swales in your backyard, putting something like that in to keep the water draining away from your house. But there's a few different things that we're going to talk about here quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about infiltration, an infiltration trench in a dry well, just to kind of keep the water going in a certain area and away from the house. Evapotranspiration. So this would be your rain gardens, your vegetated swales, and your infiltration trenches, and using things like trees and vegetation to lift some of that water up, to collect some of that water. And what's really cool about this type of stuff is it can create like an additional buffer from like the river away from between your house. So it can, if the water starts to rise into your backyard close to your house, that vegetated swale can fill with water and push it away from the home. If you are on the backside of a mountain and water comes down quickly, that can also stop it, sink it, and store it, the water that is in, and keep it away from your house. Now, this is a really great measure of keeping large amounts of water out of your house when it's coming down or coming up fairly quickly. Again, there's a limit where it's going to get inundated so much that it's not going to do everything you're looking for it to do, but it could provide some huge benefits for you, and it could also help keep water in drier times on your property, which is good. You could do a vegetated swale built up on one side with a row of blueberry bushes on it that would also help, when you're thinking about like food on your property. And these methods can go from something as simple as like an infiltration trench or a rain garden that could be fairly affordable for you to do. Putting in a vegetated swale could be more expensive. You would need somebody with an excavator to come in. You would want somebody who has a good understanding of where the water is coming from, how fast it's coming, when in your house location to know the best way to do it. And then if you wanted to bring food into it as well, having somebody help you with that would be great. And all of these things are really great ways to help keep water moving away from your house, but also storing it. And that's like the benefit of the rain gardens and the rain barrels is when the water is coming, how do you hold it so that you can use it later? How can you use it to help with growing food? And how can you keep it from inundating too quickly into your yard? Because when your yard gets too saturated, it then will just continue to come. It'll continue to overflow onto your property, and that's when it can become a hassle for your house. A lot of this stuff is also really important if you live upstream from a river to help slow the water coming down for the people, your neighbors downstream, down the river, down the hill from you. If everybody was thinking about these things and taking these things into consideration, it would slow the water coming downhill off homes, off driveways, off roads, into the river, downstream to your neighbors, and it would slow all of that down. So these things are really important for everybody to be thinking about. And again, I'm no expert on it. I could talk about it for a long time, but I just wanted to touch on it because they're really important for everybody to be thinking about as water management. And it also causes cleaner water to be flowing downstream, so it's not picking up a lot of debris on its way down. And then buffer backyard streams are like in the photo here. Again, this is a larger conversation you need to be thinking about and bring in some professionals to do, but it is really powerful when you think about stream erosion, river erosion, hillside erosion, landslides, and things like that, to use nature to help keep your house safe. I wanted to talk about some temporary options if you either have water coming down fast, like moving down off the ground, coming down the hill into your house, or rivers rising and floodwaters coming into your home. I thought I would talk about these two options. The first one is a temporary flood tube, and these can be filled from the river or a home and can be rolled out quickly. It's a temporary solution. If you know there's a chance of a flood, you could pull this out of your shed, roll it out, put a sump pump in the river into this tube, or your garden hose into this tube, and lay it out, strap it down. And in the event that the river starts picking up or the water starts pouring down the back of a hill, this is a good option. They're about, for a 24-inch diameter tube that's 50 feet long, it's around $1,000. And they make them bigger, they make them smaller. But if you were to put this around your house, it would do something. It would help. It could definitely make a difference if it was done properly. And then when the flood subsides, you could drain it out, dry it off, roll it up, and put it back in your garage or shed or something. It's something that I've suggested to a lot of homeowners that live along the river, or again with a big hillside down the back of their house, just to keep moving water away from their house. The next thing we have are these red water diversion barriers. They're easy to set up and take down. They're heavy, they're bulky, they probably take up more room to store, and they're a lot more expensive, but they claim to work better for faster moving water. And the idea is that you can put them out around like here in your garage, your doors, and things like that. You could weigh them down with sandbags as well. But each 2 foot section is around $150. And they snap into each other and can make a pretty substantial barrier against floodwaters. And what's nice about these is even if it can keep like if the flooding is, let's say, 6 hours of the floodwaters being at their peak, and that's when it's hitting your house. If you can prevent that water from coming in for an additional 2 or 3 hours, it's going to make a difference. If you can slow down the speed of the water coming in, it's going to make a difference. But I think that there is a point where these aren't going to be helping as much. But it all depends on your house. It is something to think about as a quick option. We're going to move into basement stuff, all things basement. Sump pumps. I have mucked out dozens of basements that do not have sump pumps or had sump pumps that are not working anymore and were never fixed. And I would say this is on a fairly similar level to like the temporary things. Like if water's coming into your house, if you can be, the quicker you can get it out, the better you're going to be. So having a really powerful sump pump that can get water out quicker for the maybe $200 more that it's going to be for a better sump pump is going to make such a big difference. There were homes that I went into that had water 3 feet high in the first floor, whole basement filled, but they had the ability to get that water out in a day or two and dry the house out. And I didn't sense any mold in the house once it was properly taken care of. Like the water was out quick enough that there wasn't a lot of like rotting happening, and it made such a big difference for the homeowners. People who just had water in their basement had a lot less like musty, moldy smell the quicker they got the water out. It makes such a big difference. It's not an expensive thing to do, especially if you already have a house set up for it, a basement set up for it. So it's really important to think about. Ideally, a plumber could come set this up, wired, like hardwired into your house so that it's not something you're running down and flipping on and off. They can have a float on them so when they hit a certain amount of water, it gets turned on, moves the water, hopefully very far out of your house. Like in some cases, people just have a really short discharge pipe. And as water is coming in from a flood, they're just pumping water out of their basement back into the river and it's coming back in. But if you can have it away, it's at least going to help when the floodwaters subside to get the water out as quick as possible. You can have that automatic activation, which is really powerful. The float switch will just detect the rising water, pump it out automatically, and really making sure that it's on the downhill side of your house that you're pumping the water out to. Ideally, it's sitting into a low a hole in the floor so that the water can all collect in there, and it pumps it all out so that way the floor level is always dry when the pump has done its job. Something that I utilized and this happens mostly with like some of these crazy floods that start happening, is it brings a lot of soot and mud and other things into the basement and it clogs your sump pump. So we were putting the sump pumps in a bucket with holes in it and wrapping it in like a really fine mesh to try to not overclog the pump. And there's stronger pumps can work better with this. So it's important to make sure that you've got a pump for this, like the right pump, and it's really worth putting in a better pump in your basement. And this is the topic again we could really go deep into, but I just wanted to remind people of how important it is to have a sump pump if your basement is set up best for one, like a concrete foundation and basement floor. So I'm just going to touch on some quick fix things that people can do for their basement. If you do have a concrete basement, just cleaning and repointing damaged mortar and joints with hydraulic lime mortar can make a world of difference to keep water out of your house. You can learn to do it yourself. It's not terribly difficult. Having a professional come in and kind of look at a lot of this is like looking at the whole picture. So if water's still going to continue to come in from the outside and hit the back of your wall, repointing it is really could just create an area where on the outside there's just a lot of water building up, and freeze thawing can cause more cracking. So it is important to start with the outside, make sure water's not coming in or draining back into the backside of the foundation, and then start doing a lot of this stuff. There's paints like vapor permeable waterproof coating, like Cemented-Us waterproof coating like Drylock Extreme. Now, I've also gone back and forth on this. I've heard many differing opinions on using Drylock paint or not, but I would say Drylock paint is great because it can create a waterproof barrier between the outside and the inside of the basement. You would paint it on like in the picture here, you would paint it on your wall. If you are still getting water constantly coming into your house, this is not the move. Like the move would be to fix the issue on the outside. In some cases, people recommend excavating the outside area around the basement, putting a rubber membrane across the backside of your foundation to keep water out there, and then filling the backside of your foundation and using a French drain, moving water away on the outside. So if the outside is taken care of and water is not coming back in, whatever caused the cracking on your basement, if that was a thing, if that's fixed, I think Drylock paint can be really beneficial. What's cool is if water starts coming in from the other side, you'll see it bubble up. The paint will actually bubble up. You could pop it and you could take a look and see what your issue is and what's causing that water to keep coming back in. If you've got a relatively solid foundation and you're not having water come in and you just want an extra layer, I think Drylock paint would be great. But again, bringing a professional in to assess the outside, the inside, and really the whole system of the house before making a decision like this is important. In the event that you have a basement, like a dry stack stone foundation or something, and you want insulation around it, I've had a lot of people that spray foam their basement. Yes, I think that it can provide some stability, it can provide some insulation. I generally don't love this idea for a similar reason that I just discussed. And you don't know what's happening on the backside of that insulation. And this is something I'm going to keep touching back on, is like the idea that you want to know what's happening on your foundation is really important. So when you start spraying over all of your foundation, especially if your house is flooding, especially if the earth is shifting, especially if there's water coming in on the backside, freezing, thawing, separating, spreading, like covering it up so you cannot get to it or look at it is probably not a great idea. So I would come back to putting studs up that can be like create a wall, and then using a closed cell spray foam that would allow you to access it, like you could cut it out if you needed to, or something like rock wool insulation, or a closed cell like rigid foam board that you could take off the wall material and look at what is happening, remove the insulation, dry it out, and look at what is happening on your foundation. This is something we're doing on a house right now. They had a finished basement No need for it really, but we gutted it out because it got wet. We assessed the outside of the house, moved the water away from the basement. We went inside the house, fixed the holes in the cracks in the blocks that were down there, covered it up with a vapor barrier, and then we went back and are using rigid insulation that can be removed with boards above it that around it that can be on the outside that can be removed so the homeowner every couple of years can pull it down, look at it, or in the event of a flood, pull it down, dry it out, and put it back themselves. Um, and then like thinking about cement floors, porcelain or ceramic tiles are great to put down if you want that additional added layer. A subfloor in a basement that's going to continue to flood is just going to continue to rot. It's not only going to trap water in that lower area, but it's also it's going to be hard for you to assess what's going on under there. So being able to put something down, I've also used the epoxy garage floor coating just to like seal in the basement, and then you can use a squeegee and wash it off and move it to easier to a sump pump and get it out. But these are some things to keep in mind when you're working in a basement that might continue to flood. And then there's also a whole world of basements that don't have a concrete floor and they have a dirt floor. And that's a whole other side that again, some pumps are really powerful, Some pumps are really great to have, but having some way to keep the mud of that floor out is important. I'm going to talk a little bit about backwater valves. I'm not an expert on this, but I just wanted to make a slide of it. They're used when you're on municipal water. Backwater valves allow water or sewage to flow only one way and away from your house. And without a properly placed and installed backwater valve, sewage can come into the basement through a floor drain, sinks, tubs, and toilets. These are fairly simple and affordable. I know in Waterbury, they're talking about getting people set up with them. It was an issue in a lot of the places in Vermont that had municipal water. So it's something that you could install yourself, a plumber could install, worth looking into, especially if it's something that's come up for you in the past or could potentially be an issue in the future. Again, they're not very expensive to do, and the benefits much outweigh that cost. Mold resistant insulation. It's interesting talking about mold, like this whole topic right here is like it's so dependent on your house and it's so dependent on your situation that I just really want to give an overview of different insulation types and maybe when you would use one over the other. So we're going to start with closed cell spray foam and a moisture barrier. If we're talking about your first floor, your living area, if you think, okay, I keep dealing with this, I keep pulling out old insulation, I just want to put spray foam in there, it'll keep the water away, it'll forever be there, it's less likely to mold. I'm just going to spray foam my whole first floor and then cover it up with something. Like my biggest issue with this and the biggest thing I see is that you are then trapping moisture between that spray foam and your sheathing, your studs, and then also on the other side, whatever you decide to put in the to cover your walls. So I generally stray away from something that is going to cover up and be airtight against, like when you're dealing with moisture and water. Not that there aren't applications that are beneficial for using spray foam like an attic or something, but I think if you're flooded a lot in rooms that are flooded and basements that are flooded, you want access to what's on the other side, you want to see what's going on, and you want the ability for air and for air to get through and airflow to be accessible. So rock wool is really cool. It's stone wool, it's water repellent, it's non-combustible, there's no paper on it. Um, it is, they say that you can pull it out after a flood, dry it out and put it back in. If it were to take you longer to get to removing the insulation after a flood, much less likely to mold right away. It's a little bit more expensive, but I think in the long run, this is a great option if for your first floor if you're flooding frequently. And then down to standard fiberglass bats. This I think is a good option if you know you're going to continue flooding all the time and you are going to get to removing it and putting back new insulation. At that point, I would just not get the paper backing on it. But if you know you're going to remove your wall or replace your fiberglass insulation every time it floods and you're fine with that, you just want the cheap option, just remove the paper backing and that could be fine. But that's again a decision each homeowner would have to make based on their situation. I think and we'll get into this a little bit more in some of the next slides, but thinking about like where the flood level usually is in your house. And sometimes we say like do a 4-foot gut, like even if water just got into 1 foot, doing a gut out at 4 feet. There are ways around, like, if I knew my first floor was flooding all the time, just like a foot or two, I'd probably gut out the bottom 4 feet, put blocking around that whole area, and know that I'm going to have my above 4 feet level, something that I'm not going to be gutting out often. I'm going to use good rock wool. I'm going to use potentially drywall that's like moisture resistant, and something that is not going to be changed often. And underneath on that 4-foot level, you could be using something that like maybe the insulation's something you're going to toss every time, and your wall board, you'll use something instead of drywall. So thinking about it also, like you can split your house that way, and that is a really good way to approach rebuilding resiliently if you're in a flood area. So I wanted to touch on galvanized steel studs. If your 2x4s, your studs are getting damaged from rotting, maybe they sat with water on them for a long time and you're going to be replacing them, yeah, you could throw galvanized steel studs in. I wanted to touch on it as an option because they're not going to mold, they're not going to rot, will eventually rust. But if you're going to be replacing your studs anyway, it's not a bad thing to know exists and utilize that if it feels appropriate. So some different wall materials. Flood-resistant materials allow fast drying, easy cleaning, and reusability after minor flooding. Drywall cannot get wet. Like that's it. Like if it gets wet at all, it should be removed. If you don't see mold, that doesn't mean it's not there. I always err on the side of if drywall got wet, you usually go a foot above it, at least cut it off, pull it out, replace it. It is just not meant to get wet. It is not meant to get wet repeatedly, and it's not meant to stay wet for any amount of time. Like you could splash water on it, wipe it off, you'd be fine, but it's just not a material that's meant to be flooded. There are many modern wall systems that can be removed, sanitized, and reinstalled, reducing long-term costs. And using moisture-resistant materials improves indoor air quality and reduces mold risk permanently. So there's so many different things that you could use here in place of drywall. You could just put plywood up on your wall. You could use PVC board. You could use, there's a whole slew of different things that could be put up instead of drywall. So up here I have this product called Truss Core that I think we're gonna pilot in a home soon. I've been talking to our contractor about using it. Um, it essentially looks like siding, just the way it looks. It's set up like siding. It's it seems like a really cool material. It's moisture resistant. I've heard of a lot of people using it in flood prone areas. What's really great about it is a PVC composite plastic material. It's super easy to install. It is incredibly easy to take down. Um, it is very simple in like doing joints and doing corners and doing ceilings. What I love most about this is that it may cost more money than drywall per sheet. But if you're doing an entire basement, I've priced it out and it's actually the cost to have yourself, to have a professional do this versus drywall is almost the exact same price because of how much time it takes to mud and tape correctly a drywall room. So when you think about the price that way, this is comparable, but it's a hard thing for people to think about, like when they're buying it per sheet. Looking at the cost compared to drywall is totally different, but um, they do average out in price when you're having it professionally installed. A single person can install this. You could do it yourself. There's plenty of videos and tutorials on the internet for it. It you could do an entire room in hours versus drywall, which could take would take days as you're waiting to mud and tape and sand. Um, Really cool product. Looking forward to using it a little bit more. I think this would be a great material to be using in basements that are finished, that are flood prone. Um, and again, if it gets wet, it's not gonna like it could get mold up in it, but it's very easy to take it outside, hose it off, clean it off, dry it out in the sun, and then put it back up. Flooring is a little bit different here, where I've really like never found a wonderful flooring material that's going to continue, that's gonna have water sitting on it, that's gonna be flood proof. But I will talk about what's not great. Carpets. Carpets are not great. They, as you know, they get wet, they stay wet, and they mold and can cause some issues there. Then you're ripping out carpets, you're ripping out the underlayment of it. Not great. Um, Similar with like laminate flooring. They may claim to be waterproof, but there's water in between that waterproof layer and your subfloor. And in that regard, it is not floodproof. And anybody who's ever put in like the vinyl plank flooring, it is not reusable. You cannot, like, maybe a professional could very precisely remove it and put it back in, but I don't know anybody that can do that. When you start thinking about those like locking in floor planks that are popular and they're waterproof and they're easy to install, quick to install, they're just they will trap moisture in between the subfloor and that layer, which is a recipe for disaster. Um, Using Advantex subfloor may be a great option, as it has moisture resistant resins. And again, with a cheap and easy option to remove and install is like the linoleum planks. If you know, in the event of a flood, if they're not happening every year, it happens, you remove it, you put a new one in once everything's dried. If I was in a house that flooded regularly, I'd probably just use Advantex subfloor and put sheets of nice plywood on top of it and paint it, and just know that in the event of a flood, I lift it up, I put it outside to dry. If it's still good, I'll put it back in. I know it's not the best looking, but I think in the event of when we're talking about a place that floods regularly, that's probably what I would go with. And then you can paint it with different colors every so often. It's like a new house. Um, Tile or vinyl plank tile are also good options. More expensive, but it's definitely something to think about because it will create a waterproof barrier there. One of the best things you can do if you're in a flood prone area is to elevate your utilities. Um, Elevating or strapping down outside utilities is important. I know a lot of cities, municipalities make it a requirement that your like oil tank or propane tank have to be strapped down outside for good reason. I've seen them floating down roads after a flood, during a flood. So that's important. As in the picture here, you can see just sometimes creating a little uh, outside deck for your utilities is great to keep it up and out. Um, and that's like if it's something that has to be outside, people also strap them to the outside of a house, like up a first floor, and they're just outside on the side of the house, but up maybe 10 feet. Um, Again, whatever fits your situation best, but just knowing that this simple deck and the cost to up your utilities 5 feet even is going to make a world of difference so you're not replacing them every time it floods. Electrical panels, moving them to the first floor or high above the flood line is important. Moving outlets up as well is important. Also, some of the electrical wire has paper around it in the sheathing, and that can be a problem as well. So I know a lot of people I worked with had to redo their entire electric system in their house. It's not great. But once it's done, ideally it's not going to happen again. Getting outlets as high as possible is super beneficial. Um, and you'll pay to do it once and then hopefully you won't have to do it again. Another option for indoor utilities like water heaters and things like that is to and like laundry, moving it up to a closet in the first floor or building an upstairs utility room is great. Just moving those things out of the basement sooner rather than later is important. Coming to the end, some key takeaways here. Prevention starts outside, and I think I really wanted to make that point that the things that you do outside your house for flood protection will make a world of a difference inside your house. So the best flood protection begins with proper drainage and grading. French drains, gutters, sump pumps, they redirect the water before it reaches uh, and stays in your foundation. And this reduces basement flooding and structural damage. Building with materials that can survive water, like flood resistant materials that can get wet, they can dry out, they can be reused, are key. PVC wall systems, rock wool insulation, MGO board resist mold and deterioration far better than traditional drywall and fiberglass. And again, it may cost more initially, but in the long term, if it's something that like flooding is happening uh, as often as it is currently, it's gonna pay off to upgrade sooner than later. Everybody could embrace green stormwater infrastructure, whether you flood or not. If you're in a watershed, embracing green stormwater infrastructure is a wonderful technique. So using natural and landscape-based systems to manage water sustainably. Rain gardens, permeable pavers, bioswales, and rain barrels reduce runoff, recharge groundwater, and ease pressure on municipal systems, making neighborhoods more resilient to flooding. And I think about this a lot with places like Barrie, where when it starts to rain, with the runoff off of roofs, driveways, roads, sidewalks, all that stuff, it's just all flooding down super fast into the river, down into each other's houses. There's really no way to have the ground saturate the water as it would. So thinking about even if everybody had a rain garden, rain barrel, or permeable pavers, how beneficial it would be for the people who are flooded regularly. And coming up with a design for fast recovery. A flood resilient home is built to dry quickly and recover easily. So removable wall panels, raised outlets, and waterproof flooring minimizes cleanup time and post-flood rebuilding costs. So again, it's coming up with a system for your home and with the contractor you're going to use, the LTRG you're going to use, working with a construction coordinator to look at your home and decide what is the best system for you. Some people want to set it up so that they can do it all themselves. They don't have to wait for anybody else to come. If that's where you're at, like you can come up with a fairly efficient system so that in the event of a flood, remove your walls, move your floor, pull out the insulation, let it dry, replace it, put it back in. Things like that are powerful. Having a dehumidifier you can pull out to run in that room, dry it out quickly, maybe spray some shockwave or whatever on the wood, let it do its job, remove any mold, spores, particles, and recover as quick as possible. It's all really beneficial, and the money you'll spend now will come back to you, and will save you a lot of money in the future, especially if you're flooding regularly. I've worked in homes over and over again, mucking and gutting and mucking and gutting. In some cases, I rebuilt a home and then had to gut it out again and then rebuild it again. So coming up with some of these systems are really powerful. I threw some links in here at the end. The Friends of the Winooski River have a wonderful link on green stormwater infrastructure. I brought a link to Truss Core's wall system, really great. FEMA has a flood damage resistant materials guide that you can check out. And the Vermont DEC has a guide to stormwater management. Thanks everyone for coming, and I'd love to answer any questions if I can stop sharing my screen.
So thank you, Prem, for doing that.
Thanks for coming.
Yep. And I did just want to ask, because you touched on the cost of some of these things. So I did want to ask, I don't know if I just missed it. What on average is usually the cost of some pumps, and what would be some potential obstacles in the installation of?
Yeah, so you can buy a sump pump for $50. It's probably not the sump pump I would want to pump my basement out in the event of a flood if there's 8 feet of water in it. A few $100s would get you a real powerful sump pump. I think some of the challenges are pumping them out a window, then you lose the window in your basement, and then you're insulating, or like you're putting plywood up, you're framing it out, you're putting insulation in around it with the pump PVC outside your house. So thinking about things like that, $2,000 would probably be what I would say is a good amount of money to hold for a sump pump installation professionally. I think it can go up from there. I have some homeowners that want their piping to go through the ground outside into a yeah. I have a homeowner that has 2 drainage things that he put underground himself and wanted his sump pump to be that we're reinstalling to go through that. And I was like, I don't have an excavator. We don't have that much funding to do that. We're just gonna do a pipe a few feet away from the house to move it away. But they can go up really quick. Like, are you getting it wired into your box and you're pulling an electrician in? Somebody could do it themselves for a few $100s, but to get it done well by a contractor can cost. I would say put aside $2,000. But there are some other people here that probably have some understanding and knowledge about that.
The only thing that I might add is there's potentially a cost of putting in a sump pit,
Mm,
which
yeah,
would be like cutting a hole in the assuming that you have a slab floor in the basement, cutting a hole in that concrete so that the pump itself is below the grade of the floor so that it's really getting all of the water out there. And then ideally the floor is graded in such a way that or the hole is located in the low spot of the floor so that the water's flowing there. Um, and then yeah, like Prem was saying, like, you know, as far as professional installation goes, you can kind of sky's the limit to some extent. Like you can really um a lot of the companies are gonna market various redundancies like a second pump or a battery backup,
battery backup. Yeah.
dedicated you know uh um dedicated circuits, stuff like that. But a lot of that is also things that like a homeowner could add on to an existing system over time. So yeah.
And you could do a channel around the outside of the whole basement's curving one way into that as well. And if you're coming into an existing concrete slab, they can get expensive.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Prem, by the way, for this presentation. One thing that I've been trying to learn more about and my team has is like flood resistant materials or mitigation that's specific to manufactured homes. And like I'm wondering, is a lot of what you talked about still applicable to those? Is that like a whole different kind of realm of information? Are there resources out there along those lines?
The sky's the limit on I mean, I've seen it from like, we're just going to replace the flooring of a mobile home to gutting it down to the metal studding and replacing it. I have the mindset that they're not permanent structures to begin with, and they are not meant to withstand floods. Once because it's a lot of particle board that once it gets wet and expands, you've lost the structural component of like the flooring
Mhm.
and the walls. Um, Anybody who's done this work long enough knows that this is like a touchy subject. Like I don't like to work on them. They're once you start getting like it's once you start getting into it, like the cabinets can all like if they're wet, they expand, they break, they're an issue. The walls are the same way. The floor starts to dip. The like um I think replacing them is really expensive also. Elevating them can be as well. Drying them out can be hard. Um, I think that there are things that can be done, but I'm always hesitant to like start breaking into one of them. And maybe Mike, you have some experience that you can give, but I
Um, yeah, I mean, probably similar to what Prem was saying. I think the unfortunate reality is, these are homes that were cost engineered to the max, and there's, um, you know, there's a reason that they are an affordable option. Oftentimes the only affordable
Mhm.
option, and but uh, it can be trickier to repair things in the way that you would in like a stick built home.
Okay.
And but there's also, I mean, like some of the materials that Prem was talking about are totally uh, cross compatible. So, the rock wool insulation, Some like the truss core, I'm sure could be installed. Something like a linoleum, flooring material. Kind of depends what you're replacing. And probably the age of the home itself. Some of the, I think probably newer homes are going to maybe be a little bit more um, compatible than some of the stuff that was being built back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I've been tasked, and had conversations in the past about like what it would look like to replace the floor system. And when you start, like even if like we'll talk about just the kitchen, the counters, the cabinets, they really can't be like removed and then put back in just the way that they're manufactured.
Mm.
It's not like because it was all built together. And it was all built affordably. And it's not there, you're rarely not going to find like hardwood counters and cabinets that can be pulled off, do your floor, put back on. It's all just kind of like built together with like this particle board. And if you were to do the subfloor, you would have to gut the entire home. Um, I it's something that I would love to like dive into a little bit more, but the further I have, I'm like, oh, we're gutting the whole house, redoing a
Yeah.
floor, and utilizing the metal framing of it. And maybe the siding is still good because of it's like usually a plastic composite PVC type material. Sometimes the walls are fine too because they're that like PVC board also really thin. But we even talk about like is elevating one that has been through a flood even worth it to be shifting it to move it, and then how much are you paying to elevate it and put new stairs on up to it? Is that worth what that the longevity of that house is going to be given the lifespan of them?
Okay. So it sounds like the outside things, like, still elevating utilities and anchoring, tanks is the easiest-ish and most applicable for these places.
Yeah, and a lot of them also have their utilities built in. So I was working on one where that came up, but it was like whatever it was built in somewhere into it, and the cost to
Mm.
remove it, move it, and put it someplace else was more than we expected. Um, but yeah, I think things like that are important, getting them elevated. And I think about like some of these parks that have a lot that are flooding and what can be done to protect them. And maybe it is like
Yeah.
elevating. Um, but again, like I've been underneath them and just like you put your finger up into the subfloor and it's falling apart.
Tessa, I don't know if you've ever attended the Better Building by Design conference that Efficiency Vermont hosts every year, but I've been the last handful of years, and I think it was earlier, I think it was this year, they had a seminar on it was more with an efficiency lens, but they also talked a little bit about flooding as well for manufactured homes.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever reached out to anyone in their office, but maybe they could give you the slides from that seminar, or just have some more resources to talk with you about. But also, I would put a plug in for that conference, just in general, for this group of people. Prem, Mike, I don't know if you guys have ever been, but it's a pretty good conference, and they always do it at the DoubleTree in Burlington every year. I think it's like the first week of April.
Oh, thank you. I've never heard of this before, but I'm looking into it.
I mean, they
Um,
definitely have like an efficiency lens for sure, but
but there's overlap.
yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
Rockwell had a booth there last year, and then, like Timber HP, and they have a lot of very cutting edge vendors who are there who have a lot of probably just good information for this group. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely worth sending someone from probably everyone's team on this call.
Re-say the name of that conference one more time.
Better building by design.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions, follow-ups? Anything to add? I know I didn't realize I went through my time pretty quick.
I mean, I thought that was great, Prem. I think it was touched on a whole, you know, whole soup to nuts range of issues, and yeah, hopefully folks, if they're catching up with this on the recording, it will give them some things to think about, and and I don't know where the recording is going to live, but hopefully some of the links to the resources on that slide at the end would be able to be linked.
I will be able to do that on the
Good.
VOAD website, yes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think we're gonna put it on Raft's website and share it out. I think if nothing else, it just gets people thinking about these concepts, and in making it was hard to wrap my head around because I was like, well, it matters the type of foundation you have, and then it matters you have a slab on your ground or not, or is it dirt floor? Is it dry stack stone? But where's the water coming into? Is the river rising or is it down the mountain? Like there's so many, and every slide I almost broke out in each scenario, and I was like, no, it really is just like everybody, every home, every situation is different, but thinking about like even just a few things that you can do. Like I'd love it if people did like more green stormwater infrastructure around their house, especially when you start thinking about like grow food around that too, and stopping the water, slowing it down, sinking it, rain barrels, rain gardens.
Thanks, Prem. I think this was great. I'm gonna close the recording now, just so that we have a nice clean recording. I will say that we will definitely send this out under our training, the VOAD training newsletter. We will send it to Tessa to use for you to share with the folks on your listserv. And we'll share it on the VOAD website. Feel free to share the recording wherever you would like. So I'm gonna close the recording now.